The Threxian Confederacy had always seen humanity as an amusing footnote in galactic history, a loud, fragile, short-lived species that barked more than it bit. They traded with them when it was convenient, ignored them when it was not, and mocked them behind closed doors. Humans were the galaxy's children, the joke whispered in the great halls of power. Give them a century, they'll wipe themselves out. That arrogance ended on a quiet morning above the neutral world of Avon Prime. The human diplomatic envoy Tranquility had come bearing gifts, crystals of rare helium-9 medical nanites, a peace accord written in 20 alien languages. It was meant to mark the first trade alliance between Sol and the Confederacy. Cameras from dozens of systems streamed the event live. The Threxians smiled with their fanged mouths, speaking honeyed words while their ships drifted overhead. Then, without warning, one of those ships fired. A single beam of ionized plasma struck the Tranquility. The blast split its hull open like a paper lantern, scattering the crew into the void. Millions across the galaxy watched in horror as the ship's lights faded. Its signal went silent, and Earth's ambassador, Ambassador Kiera Holt, was vaporized mid-sentence. The Threxian admiral who gave the order, High Warlord Vector, later said it was a minor incident, a misunderstanding, a display of strength to remind humans of their place. He didn't know it then, but his display would burn his entire species into legend. On Earth, the footage played on every screen. No one spoke. No one moved. Cities fell into silence as the final transmission looped again and again, Ambassador Holt smiling, saying, "Let this be the beginning of friendship," before the beam struck. The silence that followed felt endless. At first, the galaxy expected the humans to beg for peace. They were, after all, still recovering from centuries of wars on their own world. Their fleets were small, their colonies young, their weapons outdated. What could they possibly do against the Threxian war machine that spanned 100 systems? But humanity did not beg. They went dark. No signals came from Earth, no transmissions from Mars, Titan, or the Luna Spire. The trade routes that once flickered with human cargo ships turned empty. The stars on the human border went black, one by one, as if the species had vanished entirely. For 3 weeks, the galaxy watched and waited. Some called it cowardice, others whispered of something worse. And then, on the 23rd day, every communications network in the known galaxy received a single encrypted pulse. It broke through shields, bypassed filters, and flooded every screen with a message written in every known language. Transmission from Human Command, Priority Omega. You declared battle. Now we'll remind you what true power means. No signature, no source, just the cold pulse of human resolve. The galaxy laughed at first, the Threxian Confederacy especially. Their leaders gathered in grand chambers, boasting that the humans had finally lost their minds. They think words are weapons, sneered Vector. Let them come, we'll show them what real war looks like. He didn't realize how right he was. In the void beyond Pluto, buried under a moon of ice, the Terran Defense Command had awakened. Hidden since the early days of the colonization wars, it had been built not for expansion, but for survival. A fortress wrapped around a dying star, its AI network linked to ancient war machines humanity had sworn never to use again. Generations of peace had buried their names: Valkyrie Protocol, Project Cerberus, the Lazarus fleets. Myths of an age when Earth nearly destroyed itself. The galaxy had mocked humanity for their violent past, but that past had never truly been buried. It had only been waiting. Now it was awake. The skies above Sol filled with ships, dark, angular, and silent. Fleets that had never been charted on any registry. Carriers the size of mountains, their hulls wrapped in black armor that absorbed radar and light. Weapons built to fight the impossible, black hole lances, rail cannons that could strike across planetary orbits, and drones that moved faster than thought. Every factory roared to life. Every forge on Mars, every moonyard on Titan, every automated foundry orbiting Jupiter, all of them hummed with the same purpose. Humanity was not preparing for war. Humanity was war given form again. And in that silence, their fury grew. Meanwhile, on Threxia Prime, the Confederacy continued to celebrate. They believed the humans had been broken. They toasted their victory under the glow of twin suns, their capital skis filled with parades. Children wore fake human masks and laughed as they burned them in the streets. But some among them were not laughing. Threxian intelligence agents reported strange anomalies near the human frontier. Uncharted gravitational waves, star systems flickering in and out of detection, mining colonies gone completely silent. A few scouts sent to investigate never returned. Still, the warlords dismissed it. Probably pirates, they said, or the humans killing themselves as usual. Then the stars began to move. At first, they thought it was a glitch, whole constellations shifting against the black. But as hours passed, the truth became clear. The stars weren't moving. They were coming closer. Thousands of wormholes bloomed across Threxian space, tearing the fabric of the void apart like paper. From the rifts emerged ships, human ships, but nothing like any the galaxy had ever seen. The flagship TNS Valkyrie led the charge. Her hull was forged from neutron steel, her engines glowing like a captured sun. Around her, dreadnoughts and destroyers formed a storm of metal and fury, their thrusters leaving white scars across the darkness. They did not announce themselves, they did not demand surrender, they simply advanced. The Threxians scrambled their fleets. Orders shouted, alarms blaring across entire sectors, but deep down, some already knew. The humans had come not to negotiate, not to punish, but to end. And far away, watching from the command deck of the Valkyrie, Admiral Sarai Mendoza stood in silence. Her face was carved in the cold light of the main screen. Before her floated the map of enemy systems, each one pulsing red. Behind her, thousands of officers waited for her command. She spoke softly, almost gently. Ambassador Holt once said peace was our greatest strength. Today it's our weapon, because we gave them peace, and they mistook it for weakness. Her hand hovered over the console. A single touch and the fleet would move. For every life they took, she whispered, we'll remind them who we are. Her voice did not rise in anger. It was calm, steady, certain. Execute the Valkyrie protocol. And as the order rippled through the stars, humanity unleashed the storm that had been sleeping for centuries. The Threxians had wanted to see the true face of human power. They were about to learn that the only thing more terrifying than humanity's hatred was its silence before the strike. The void trembled. When the Valkyrie and her sister ships crossed through the wormholes, space itself seemed to bend under their presence. To the Threxians, it was like watching a storm of stars descend upon them, each ship wrapped in a blue shimmer of gravitic shields, engines burning like the hearts of newborn suns. Human command had not sent diplomats this time. They had sent judgment. The first Threxian scout fleet met them at the border of the Charon system. 27 cruisers strong, confident in their size and speed. The humans didn't even slow down. Admiral Sarai Mendoza stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, her eyes fixed on the enemy formation. Her face was calm, her hands folded behind her back. Around her, officers worked in silence. The air hummed with tension, the low growl of reactors vibrating through the metal floors. Enemy fleet closing, said Lieutenant Park, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Weapons charging across all ships, they're hailing us. Don't answer, Mendoza replied. Her voice was quiet, controlled. They've said enough. Seconds later, the Threxians fired. A cascade of plasma beams lit up the void, streaks of emerald light slamming into the Valkyrie's shields. The ship didn't move. The energy rippled, scattered, then vanished into nothing. Shields holding, Park whispered. Mendoza gave a small nod. Return fire. The Valkyrie's cannons came alive. Long rail barrels glowed white-hot as magnetic coils roared. Then came the thunder. The first volley of hypervelocity slugs tore through the darkness. They moved faster than any Threxian sensor could track, each the size of a city bus, wrapped in magnetic fields that burned like lightning. The enemy fleet had no time to react. One moment they were there. The next, their ships were gone, shattered into glowing fragments that drifted through the silence. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. On the observation deck, Mendoza watched the debris field stretch across the stars. Her officers stared in disbelief. Humanity had fought wars before, but nothing like this. Nothing this cold. Record it, Mendoza ordered. Transmit to command, Charon system is clear. Far below, on the surface of the Threxian world of Torvak, the people looked up to see the sky burning. Fire rained down from orbit, kinetic strikes descending like falling gods. Each impact was a hammer blow, flattening mountains, vaporizing oceans. From orbit, human marines dropped in silver pods, slicing through the atmosphere like falling stars. When they landed, the ground shook. Commander Eli Drake stepped out of his pod, his armor gleaming under the firelit sky. His visor reflected the chaos around him, cities burning, alien soldiers scattering in panic. He raised his weapon, an electromagnetic rifle built for precision and devastation, and said quietly, "For Holt, for Earth." The 77th Drop Battalion moved as one, ghosts in steel, voices silent, eyes burning blue. They did not cheer, they did not speak. They were humanity's answer to arrogance. At the same moment across the galaxy, every Terran fleet struck in perfect synchronization. It was not war, it was a reckoning. The Threxians had ruled through fear for centuries. Worlds had bowed under their ships, paid tribute in blood and metals. They had believed they were untouchable. But as human warships carved across their empire, they learned a truth their ancestors had forgotten. Humans were never meant to be ruled. From orbit, human drones painted the skies with silent light, tracking every ship, every bunker, every fortress. The strikes were precise, surgical, merciless. Not one wasted shot, not one spared target. The Threxians tried to resist. They launched their legendary dreadnoughts, the pride of their fleets, each one the size of a moon. The humans didn't flinch. On the 4th day of the war, the Valkyrie met the Threxian flagship Vorax Claw in orbit above Jorthal Prime. The Threxian ship fired first, an entire barrage of plasma torpedoes, enough to destroy a planet's moon. The Valkyrie's counterfire lasted 12 seconds. When it ended, Vorax Claw was gone, vaporized. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Across the galaxy, the other species watched in horror. News broadcasts carried fragments of intercepted communications, broken Threxian cries, desperate distress calls, and human commands that sounded almost mechanical in their calm. Target acquired. Strike confirmed. System neutralized. There was no rage in those voices, no vengeance, only duty. To the watching worlds, it was terrifying, because humanity wasn't fighting with hatred, they were fighting with purpose, and that made them unstoppable. On the 7th day, the Threxian capital fell. The once proud world of Threxia Prime was now a wasteland of glass and ash. Its twin suns reflected off a dead sea, where the last of the planetary shields flickered and died. From orbit, Admiral Mendoza watched it all in silence. Her comms officer spoke softly. "Transmission from enemy survivors, Admiral. They're asking for terms." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Mendoza turned toward the viewscreen. "Put it through." The image flickered, a Threxian warlord, scarred and shaking, surrounded by fire. His voice was broken, trembling with disbelief. "Human commander," he said, we yield, end this, please." Mendoza studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of a world. "We gave you peace," she said. "You called it weakness, you murdered our people and laughed." Her eyes hardened. "There will be no peace this time, only remembrance." The screen went dark. Moments later, the human orbital cannons fired one last time. The capital vanished in light. When the last shot faded, there was silence again. But this silence was different. It was not the stillness before a storm. It was the stillness after one, when everything that stood before had been swept away. On the bridge, Mendoza stood alone for a long time. Her crew waited for her command, but none came. Finally, she turned away from the burning planet and spoke quietly to no one in particular. "They'll write songs about this," she said, "but none will understand." Far away on Earth, people watched the transmissions through tears and awe. The once humiliated species had risen, and the galaxy could never again look at them the same way. Mothers held their children tighter. Veterans saluted the screens. And in the quiet streets, as news of victory spread, no one celebrated. They had won, but the cost of being human had always been heavy. In the days that followed, the remaining Threxian colonies sent desperate messages to anyone who would listen. Some begged for help. Others cursed the humans and vowed revenge. But none of them ever saw human ships again. Because by the time the Threxians realized what had truly happened, it was already too late. The human fleets had vanished, slipping back through their wormholes, leaving nothing but silence and ruin behind. No demands, no conquest, no glory. Only a warning written across the stars. This is what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. And so the galaxy learned to fear the name Human Command. For when humans were provoked, they did not simply fight to win. They fought to end. The Threxian Empire was burning. What had once been the heart of their power now lay in ruins. Whole worlds had gone dark, communications silenced, fleets gone without trace. Their people whispered that the humans had become ghosts in the void, moving unseen, striking without warning. But ghosts didn't leave craters the size of continents. Ghosts didn't make stars vanish. And yet, that's what the humans had done. Across the galaxy, human warships appeared like omens of death. One moment the sky was empty. The next, a Terran dreadnought was there, silent, black, and waiting. No warnings, no words, just destruction. The Threxian fleets fought back, of course. They always had. Pride was carved into their bones, but pride could not stop metal traveling at a fraction of light speed. In the Varan expanse, the Threxians made their stand. It was a trap, one they believed perfect. 16 planetary defense rings, 8 dreadnoughts, 200,000 fighters, the kind of force that had crushed entire rebellions. At its center stood Admiral Cather, the Confederacy's last great warlord. He was old, scarred, his armor marked with victories. His confidence was a fire that refused to die. He stood on his bridge looking out over his fleet. "Let them come," he said. "Let these humans taste what real war feels like." Then the human fleet arrived. The wormholes opened above Varan IV like the tearing of the heavens. The space around them twisted, gravity itself screaming as over 2,000 Terran ships emerged. At their heart, the Valkyrie led the way, engines burning white-hot. For a moment both sides paused, the calm before the chaos. Then Admiral Mendoza's voice came through every Terran channel. "Execute Phase 2. The stars exploded. Terran destroyers moved faster than the eye could track, their railguns firing in unison. A rain of metal and fire streaked through the void, tearing through the Threxian formation like a blade through silk. Plasma beams answered, filling space with rivers of green fire. Entire human frigates vanished in bursts of energy, but the rest kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 3 more surged forward. Inside the Valkyrie, the bridge shook violently. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Mendoza gripped the console, eyes cold as she watched the chaos unfold. "Status." "Port shield down to 60%, an officer shouted. 2 destroyers lost, Aegis and Solitude. Mendoza's voice was steady. "Target their command ship." A targeting icon flashed across the screen. The enemy flagship, a monstrous fortress of metal, was surrounded by hundreds of escorts. Impossible odds. But humans had never cared about odds. "Fire the lance." Deep within the Valkyrie, the main cannon charged. The entire ship groaned as power drained from every system, feeding the weapon's core. The forward hull glowed with blue-white light, brighter and brighter until it looked like a star being born. "Lance ready," said Lieutenant Park. Mendoza's eyes narrowed. "Release." The beam erupted like the wrath of a sun. It tore through space, slicing across the void and cutting straight through the Threxian flagship. For one breathless moment, there was silence. Then the ship split apart, its hull cracking open like glass. The explosion that followed was so vast that sensors on the other side of the system registered it as a new celestial body. The Threxian formation broke. Cather survived the blast barely. His ship had been thrown clear, half its hull melted. Alarms screamed, flames licked the bridge. Around him, his officers shouted, desperate. "They're tearing us apart, Admiral. We must retreat." Cather's claws gripped the command railing until metal bent. "Retreat," he spat. "To where? There's nowhere left to run." He turned to the window, and there it was, the human fleet closing in. The stars behind them blazed with drive light, so bright they seemed like the eyes of gods. Cather sank into his chair. For the first time in his long life, he felt fear, not because of death, but because he realized the truth. They hadn't been fighting humans anymore. They were fighting something beyond understanding. Something that had risen from centuries of struggle and pain. Something born from every war humanity had ever survived. He whispered, "We call them beasts, but beasts don't build storms." And then, as his ship began to tear apart around him, his final thought was not of victory, but regret. Hours later, the battle was over. What was left of the Threxian fleet floated lifeless, their ships reduced to drifting husks. Fire and ice filled the void. Bodies, alien and human alike, drifted silently among the debris. Inside the Valkyrie, the bridge was quiet. The crew worked in whispers, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. The cost of victory hung heavy in the air. "Report casualties," Mendoza said. 3,000 confirmed dead, Park answered softly. Another 12,000 missing. Mendoza closed her eyes. 3,000 lives. Names, faces, families, all gone. But there was no room for grief, not yet. "Transmit victory report to command," she said. "Then prepare for redeployment. The war isn't over." Meanwhile, far from the front lines, the galaxy trembled. News spread faster than light. Whispers carried on every frequency. Entire species watched in disbelief. The proud Threxian Confederacy, the oldest empire known, had been broken in less than 2 weeks. In the council halls of Wren, ambassadors argued in panic. "The humans will come for us next," cried the Zarin delegate, his wings twitching with fear. "They only seek revenge," said another. "If we stay out of their way, they'll stop." But even as they spoke, every screen in the chamber flickered to life. The human emblem appeared, a single blue earth surrounded by stars. A voice followed, calm and cold. "This transmission is from human command. The Threxian Confederacy has been neutralized. Hostile action against humanity will no longer be tolerated. We do not seek war, but we will not forgive those who bring it to our door." And then the voice paused, just long enough to chill the blood of every listener. "Remember Avon Prime. Remember who fired first." The message ended. Silence filled the chamber. No one spoke, no one dared. Back aboard the Valkyrie, Admiral Mendoza stood alone in her quarters, staring at the stars beyond the glass. They were beautiful tonight, cold, endless, indifferent. She placed her hand against the glass, her reflection faint and ghostly. "We warned them," she whispered. "We gave them peace." Her voice trembled for the first time. "Now all that's left is the lesson." Outside, the fleet drifted through the wreckage of another fallen empire. Fires burned in the distance, small and fatting like dying memories. And through it all, the humans remained silent. No songs, no cheers, no celebration. Just the quiet hum of engines and the heavy breath of history being rewritten. In the dark corners of the galaxy, the name Earth became something else. No longer a planet, no longer a people, but a warning. A whisper carried from world to world. "Do not awaken the humans. Because once they rise, they do not stop. And when they come, they bring the storm." The war had stretched across the stars, but at its heart, it still began and ended with Earth. Every soldier, every captain, every ship that now burned across the Threxian frontier carried the memory of home, the blue planet that had once been mocked, scarred, and underestimated. They fought not for conquest, but for something deeper, something sacred. They fought for Sol. High above the black clouds of Threxia's last fortress world, the TNS Valkyrie hovered in silent orbit, her engines dimmed to a faint blue glow. Inside her armored hull, the crew prepared for the final descent. Admiral Sarai Mendoza stood at the center of the command deck. Her uniform was burned and torn in places, her once dark hair now streaked with silver from sleepless nights. But her eyes were sharp, steel beneath fire. "Command confirms this is the last stronghold," said Lieutenant Park. "The Threxian High Warlord is entrenched underground, thousands of hostiles, automated defenses." Mendoza nodded slowly. "We end it here." She opened a comm link to all units. The voice that followed echoed across 100 ships and 1,000 armored suits. "This is Admiral Mendoza of the Terran Navy," she began. "We came into this war because they thought peace was weakness. They killed our diplomats. They called us children. They believed humanity would break." Her voice hardened. "They were wrong. We are the children of storms. We are the survivors of our own extinction. And today we remind the galaxy why Earth still burns bright." The fleet answered in silence, not because they lacked courage, but because no words were needed. In the drop bay, Commander Eli Drake checked his armor. The 77th Drop Battalion, known as the Falling Titans, stood ready beside him. Each Marine was encased in black exosuits layered with adaptive plating, glowing faintly at the joints. They were the spear of Earth, forged from the strongest and most broken souls. Drake's voice came through the comms, deep and steady. "We've cleared the way for everyone else. We finished this so our children won't have to." A Marine beside him laughed softly, nerves hidden under courage. "Think the aliens will finally get it, sir." Drake smiled under his helmet, though it didn't reach his eyes. "They'll understand just before the end." The drop lights turned red. The bay doors opened, revealing the burning planet below. "Drop in 3, the automated voice began. 2. The Marines leaned forward, the wind of space pulling at them. 1. The light turned green, and the sky fell. The drop pods streaked through the atmosphere like comets, trails of fire tearing the heavens open. On the ground, Threxian anti-air batteries turned upward, firing everything they had. But the humans came too fast. Pods slammed into the surface, burrowing deep into soil and metal. A heartbeat later, their doors exploded outward. The 77th emerged. They moved like shadows through fire, silent, unstoppable death wrapped in armor. Energy blasts lit up the battlefield, but human shields flared and held. Drake's rifle sang with blue light, each round finding its mark. "Push forward," he shouted. "Take the citadel." They advanced through smoke and ash, through the ruins of what had once been the Threxian pride. The aliens screamed their war chants, their massive forms surging from the trenches, but the humans met them with thunder. The ground shook with every impact. The air burned with the scent of ozone and blood. And above it all, the human fleet rained fire from orbit. Back in orbit, Admiral Mendoza watched the surface light up like a storm. Her jaw was tight, her hand resting on the glass as if she could touch the fire below. A communication officer turned toward her. "Command requests confirmation. Ground assault successful." "Not yet," she said quietly. "They're still fighting." She thought of the Marines down there, of Eli Drake, the soldier she had once trained beside, the man who had saved her life during the Titan riots decades ago. She had sent him into the fire once more. Her voice softened. "Hold orbit. If the fortress fires up again, glass the surface." The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, Drake's team." "Knows the cost," she said. "We all do." On the surface, the fortress loomed ahead, a black mountain of alloy and bone, surrounded by walls alive with defense turrets. The Threxians fought with desperation now, their disciplined ranks collapsing into madness. Drake's HUD flickered with red warnings. "Ammo low," the AI chimed. "Shields critical." He ignored it. He only had one goal left. They reached the gates under a hail of plasma fire. "Breach," Drake ordered. Charges detonated. The gate shattered inward, sending alien guards flying. The Marines stormed the inner halls, their boots clanging against the alien metal. At the top of the citadel stood the last Threxian warlord, a towering figure clad in armor made from the bones of conquered species. His 4 eyes burned with hate. "You," the warlord snarled, "you call this justice?" Drake's armor hissed as it recharged one last time. He raised his rifle but didn't fire. "No," he said quietly, "this is memory." Then he charged. The fight was brutal. The warlord swung with the force of a collapsing wall, his blade carving the air. Drake dodged, fired, rolled, his every move honed by decades of training and loss. The warlord struck him across the chest, throwing him against the wall. Armor cracked. Blood filled his throat. Still, Drake rose. He activated his gauntlet plasma blade, igniting with a blue flame. With a roar that carried through the halls, he drove it through the alien's heart. The warlord gasped, eyes wide in disbelief. "Impossible." Drake leaned close. "You made us remember what we are." And with a final twist, he ended him. Above on the Valkyrie, sensors confirmed it. Enemy command neutralized. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Mendoza did not join them. She only whispered, "It's done." Moments later, the transmission came through, a faint signal barely holding. "Admiral," Drake's voice crackled through static. "Citadel secure, mission complete." Mendoza closed her eyes. "Good work, Commander. Prepare for extraction." There was a long pause. Then Drake said, "No need, ma'am. You've got your victory." The channel cut off. Mendoza stared at the console, her hand trembling. "Eli," she whispered, but there was nothing more. On the surface, the citadel burned like a second sun. The Threxian War was over. The enemy fleet shattered, their world silenced, their empire gone. And yet in the quiet aftermath, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. In the years to come, the galaxy would remember the heroes of Saul, the nameless soldiers who fell, the fleets that never returned, the leaders who carried the weight of peace on their backs. They would remember that Earth had not sought glory, it had sought justice. And it had found it no matter the cost. In her private log, Admiral Mendoza recorded her final entry of the campaign. "We have won, but victory feels hollow. Perhaps that's what it means to be human, to survive even when it hurts, to protect even when it costs everything. The stars will know our name now, not because we conquered them, but because we showed them that we could." She closed the log. Outside her window, the fleet drifted through the ashes of war. The galaxy was quiet again, but it was not peace. It was the silence of a universe that had finally learned to fear humanity. The Threxian Confederacy was no more. Their banners, once symbols of terror and pride, now drifted as tattered debris in the black. Their fleets were ash, their worlds silent. And yet, even in their defeat, the galaxy could not look away from what the humans had done. It had taken them less than a month. An empire that had lasted for 2,000 years, with armies that had crushed dozens of civilizations, was gone in 28 days. And the terrifying part was not how quickly it ended, but how calm the humans were while doing it. On the bridge of the TNS Valkyrie, Admiral Sarai Mendoza stood in silence. The stars outside burned red with the remains of the last Threxian defense line. It was over. Finally over. Around her, her officers worked in quiet exhaustion. No cheers, no laughter, just the hollow hum of systems and the faint echo of distant comms. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Park softly, approaching her, "the enemy leadership has been eliminated. Their capital is gone. Command requests final confirmation before we broadcast the ceasefire notice." Mendoza didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the viewport, where the blue curve of a dying world faded beneath the fleet. "Ceasefire," she repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. "There's no one left to fire back." Park hesitated. "Then it's done, ma'am." Mendoza turned slowly. Her face looked carved from stone. "No," she said, "it's not done until the galaxy remembers." In the ruins of Threxia Prime, survivors clawed through the wreckage. The skies were ash, the air heavy with the stink of melted metal and ozone. The once golden towers of their capital had collapsed into jagged skeletons. A group of Threxian civilians gathered near a crater, their scales blackened from the heat. A child whimpered, clutching the broken arm of an adult who no longer breathed. They looked up as a sound filled the air, low, deep, unending. A human dropship descended from the smoke. The survivors flinched, expecting another attack, but the ship did not open fire. It landed, its engines hissing softly. The ramp lowered. 3 figures in black armor stepped out. One carried a med kit, another carried water. The lead soldier removed her helmet. Her eyes were human, brown, tired, and full of something the Threxians couldn't name. "Hold still," she said quietly, kneeling beside the child. "You're safe now." The Threxians didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. And for the first time since the war began, there was something other than fear in their eyes. Word of it spread. The humans were rebuilding what they had destroyed. They sent aid ships, medical drones, and food convoys to the very worlds they had bombed. Some called it mercy, others called it arrogance, but to the humans it was neither. It was balance. Human command ordered reconstruction of every Threxian colony that had not resisted. "We do not conquer," the order read. "We restore, so they will remember the cost of forcing our hand." For every city destroyed, 1,000 human engineers descended to rebuild it. For every burned forest, machines planted new life. But even as they healed, the galaxy trembled. Because kindness from a species capable of such destruction was not comforting. It was terrifying. In the council halls of Vren, the other galactic powers gathered in secret. Representatives from 12 species sat in uneasy silence. Holograms of the Terran fleet hovered above the center table, dark ships surrounded by spheres of light. "They say humanity is withdrawing," one delegate said, his voice trembling. "Their fleets are vanishing back into Sol." "They're not retreating," said another. "They're waiting." A third slammed his fist against the table. "They just destroyed an empire. How can you talk of waiting? They'll come for us next." The room erupted into chaos. Voices rose, claws slammed, wings flared. Until the lights dimmed and a new hologram appeared. A message from human command. The room fell silent. The image that flickered to life was of Admiral Mendoza. Her face was unreadable, her uniform black, her tone measured. "To all civilizations of the Galactic Council," she began. "The war between the Terran systems and the Threxian Confederacy has ended. The aggressor is gone. The cause of war, diplomatic murder, has been resolved." She paused, her gaze steady, heavy with quiet power. "We will not claim territory. We will not demand tribute. But understand this, any act of violence against humankind or its allies will be met with equal and absolute force." Her words echoed through the hall. "We do not seek to rule the stars," she continued, "but we will never kneel to them again." And then, as her image began to fade, she added one final sentence, soft, but carrying the weight of every battle fought and life lost. "Peace to us is sacred. Do not mistake it for weakness ever again." The transmission ended. No one spoke for a long time. Back aboard the Valkyrie, Mendoza stood in her private quarters, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. The Threxian space was now marked as neutral, dark gray where once there had been red. Commander Eli Drake's name was among the fallen, etched into the memorial list that scrolled along the screen. She reached out and touched it gently. "You did it, Eli," she whispered. "You finished what they started." Outside, the stars drifted in silence. Mendoza closed her eyes and remembered Earth, the oceans, the forests, the sound of rain against steel rooftops. It had been years since she'd seen it, years since the quiet skis of home. For a moment, she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed since the war began, grief. Not for the enemy, not for victory, but for everything lost along the way. Days later, the Valkyrie began its journey home. One by one, the fleets followed, vanishing into the wormholes that had brought them across the galaxy. When the last Terran ship disappeared, the void felt emptier somehow. The Threxians who survived would rebuild, forever haunted by the memory of what had come for them. They would teach their children about the blue-eyed soldiers, the thunder of railguns, the silence before every strike. They would whisper warnings into the night. "Do not provoke the humans." And in time, even that whisper would become myth. On Earth, the sky was bright again. People filled the streets of New Geneva, watching as the first of the returning fleets entered orbit. Cheers erupted, tears flowed, and for the first time in months there was laughter. But Mendoza didn't celebrate. From her window in command headquarters, she looked up at the stars, the same stars that had burned with war. Behind her, a young officer asked quietly, "Do you think it's over, ma'am?" Mendoza didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "No, it's never over. As long as someone looks at humanity and sees weakness, it never will be." The officer bowed his head. Mendoza turned back to the window. "Let them fear us," she whispered. "Fear keeps peace alive." Far beyond Sol, the last human transmission from the war still drifted through the void, replaying endlessly on forgotten frequencies. "You declared battle. Now we'll remind you what true power means." Those words would outlive every empire, every war, every species. Because the galaxy had learned its lesson. You could fight humans. You could even wound them. But you could never, ever break them. The galaxy had gone quiet. Where once there was chatter across trade routes and diplomatic channels, now there was silence. The stars that had burned with ambition dimmed under the weight of fear. Every empire, every alliance, every wandering race had heard of what happened to the Threxians. They called it the culling of fire. Others whispered another name. The judgment of Earth. Whatever they called it, the meaning was clear. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. 3 months after the war's end, the Terran fleets had withdrawn. The great wormholes they had carved into the void flickered and closed. It was as if the humans had vanished again, retreating into their corner of the galaxy. But no one dared to follow. Not even to trade. Not even to talk. because behind the silence of Saul was the memory of thunder. Admiral Sarai Mendoza sat alone in her quarters aboard the Valkyrie, now docked in orbit over Mars. The warship that had led the storm was now quiet, its corridors empty of laughter or life. She had refused every medal, every speech, every parade. Peace didn't need parades, she said. It needed silence. A soft chime broke her thoughts. Incoming transmission, said the ship's AI, its voice low and feminine. Source. Classified, origin, Council of Wren. Mendoza sighed, put it through. The hologram that flickered to life was of an alien diplomat, tall, insectoid, covered in iridescent scales. Its tone was cautious, its body language trembling. Admiral Mendoza, it began. The Galactic Council requests your presence. There are concerns. The balance of power has shifted. The Threxians' fall has left a void. Mendoza looked unimpressed. A void they earned. The alien hesitated. Be that as it may, there are whispers that humanity will expand, that you will claim what you destroyed. The Council needs assurance. Mendoza rose from her chair, her movements slow and deliberate. Assurance, she repeated. You want me to promise that we'll stay in our corner of the stars? Yes, the alien said softly. Or others will unite. Fear is spreading. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Good. The diplomat froze. Good. Fear means they remember, she said. It means they'll think before they draw a weapon again. Tell your council this. Humanity has no need to conquer, but if another war comes, we will end it faster than the first. The hologram flickered and vanished. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. Far beyond Mars, in the shadow of Jupiter, the Elysium shipyards roared back to life. Thousands of engineers worked day and night, constructing new fleets, not for war but for defense. Humanity had learned a brutal truth. Peace was fragile, and only strength could protect it. The new ships bore names carved in memory of the fallen. Holt's Promise, Drake's Honor, Tranquility Reborn. Children on Earth grew up hearing those names in school, learning not of hatred but of survival. Teachers told them what their ancestors had faced and why they must never forget. You don't have to love war, the lessons said. You just have to remember what happens when you let others bring it to your home. But outside the Sol system, not all species accepted peace. In the dark belt of the Corin Nebula, old Threxian remnants gathered. Survivors, pirates, and zealots, those who still worshipped the memory of their fallen empire. They whispered of revenge, of rebuilding, of returning the storm to Earth. At first, the galaxy ignored them, but soon human intelligence picked up the transmissions. Mendoza read the reports in silence. They never learn, she murmured. Then she gave a single order, send the Black Wing. The Black Wing was not a fleet. It was a shadow. A task force made of the most skilled and feared soldiers Earth had ever bred, agents who hunted in silence, unseen, unknown. What happened in the Corin Nebula was never recorded in any official report. No one saw the battle. No transmissions escaped. But months later, a Threxian refugee ship stumbled into the outer colonies, drifting and broken. Its captain was half mad, his eyes wide with terror. They came from nowhere, he gasped. No light, no sound, just shadows and fire. What did they look like? Someone asked. He shivered, human. Then he died. The story spread like wildfire. And once again the galaxy remembered, humans did not threaten, they warned. They did not talk about war, they simply ended it. The Council of Wren met in secret again. The chamber was darker this time, quieter, the air heavy with dread. The delegates argued about treaties and diplomacy, but beneath their words was fear. Finally, one voice spoke what all were thinking. They don't want power, the old Voltari delegate said softly. They don't need it, they already have something greater. What? Another asked. Reputation. Weeks later, an alien scout vessel wandered too close to human space. The pilot, a curious academic, wanted to see the legendary Earth with his own eyes. He found it glowing blue and green in the dark, beautiful and fragile. But what made him tremble was not the planet itself. It was the wall of ships orbiting it. Massive carriers, sleek destroyers, silent drones, thousands of them forming an unbroken ring around their homeworld. Each one armed, alert, and patient. The pilot recorded it all, whispering into his recorder. They guard their home like gods guard heaven. Before he left, a single human message pinged his ship's console. You've seen enough, leave. He fled without a word. On Earth, Admiral Mendoza finally retired. She walked the green hills of her home country for the first time in decades, the wind cool and clean. The war had cost her more than medals could repay, friends, youth, peace of mind. But she had done what was needed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small child approached her. "Are you the lady from the stories?" the girl asked shyly. Mendoza smiled faintly. "Which stories?" "The ones where humans saved the stars," the child said. She knelt and looked the girl in the eyes. "We didn't save the stars," she said gently. "We reminded them we belong among them." The child nodded, not fully understanding but smiling anyway. And for the first time in years, Mendoza smiled back. That night she looked up at the sky and whispered to the ghosts of the fallen. "We did what we had to, now they know." Above her the stars burned brighter, as if listening. Across the galaxy, billions looked to those same stars, remembering the day humanity's voice broke the heavens. The message still echoed in their minds, a warning and a promise intertwined. "You declared battle. Now we'll remind you what true power means." And from that day forward, every empire, every race, every would-be conqueror carried one truth in their hearts. When the humans go silent, the storm is coming. Years passed, then decades. The fires of war faded into memory, but the scars it left across the stars never healed. The Threxian systems remained quiet ruins, ghost worlds swallowed by dust and time. Trade ships avoided them. Maps no longer marked their names. The galaxy had erased them from history, but not from fear. Because fear had become the new law of the stars. And at the center of that fear was Earth. The human fleets no longer roamed the galaxy. They didn't need to. Their ships stayed close to Sol, orbiting in silent formation like sentinels made of metal and light. Thousands of vessels, sleek, cold, motionless, surrounded the blue planet and its colonies like a wall no one dared to breach. The humans had no empire, no flag spread across other worlds. They never claimed new territory. They didn't have to. Because every empire, every ruler, every species in the galaxy now ruled under one unspoken law. Never provoke Earth. In the Galactic archives, historians tried to explain what had happened. Some called it the balance of terror, others the silence of Sol, but none of them truly understood it. They could measure the destruction, list the dead, record the victories. But how could they describe the presence that now hung over the galaxy like a storm waiting to return? No one had seen a human warship fire in over 50 years. No one had seen a Terran soldier leave their system. And yet, every government in the galaxy kept their fleets aimed away from Sol, their armies trembling at the thought of those quiet, patient watchers among the stars. In the capital of the Vren Dominion, an old diplomat told a story to his students. His scales had dulled with age, and his voice rasped like wind over stone. "I was there," he said. "I saw what they did to the Threxians. I saw the sky burn." The younglings around him leaned forward, their eyes wide. "What did they look like, teacher?" one asked. He smiled bitterly. "Like us," he said. "Two eyes, two hands, flesh and blood, but their eyes were wrong." "Wrong how?" another asked. He looked at the stars through the window and whispered. They had seen the end of the world and survived it. Silence filled the hall. None of the younglings spoke again. Back on Earth, the world had changed. Cities gleamed again, clean and bright. The oceans sparkled. Forests stretched where once there were ruins. Humanity had rebuilt not just its worlds, but itself. The war had united them in a way centuries of politics never could. There were no more nations, no more divisions. Only the Terran Union, one people, one voice. Admiral Sarai Mendoza's name was carved into the foundation of the new capital, New Geneva. Her statue stood in the square, not in victory, but in warning, her gaze cast upward toward the stars she had conquered and cursed. Underneath, a single line was engraved. Peace through memory. But even in peace, the storm whispered. On the far edge of human space, deep in the asteroid colonies of the outer belt, miners claimed to have seen something, strange lights beyond the void. Unidentified ships, sleek and fast, drifting near the borders of Sol. When the reports reached Terran Command, they acted quietly. No broadcasts, no threats, no alarms. Just a single order. Activate the watch. From the dark side of the moon, ancient stations powered up for the first time in years. Their sensors reached far across the void, reading every movement, every anomaly. Within hours, the intruders vanished. Days later, a small transmission was found drifting through subspace. A voice, faint and distorted. They found us, they don't sleep. And then nothing. In the Council of Vren, panic spread. The memory of humanity's wrath was still carved into their bones, and now the rumors had begun again. "Do you think they'll strike?" one ambassador asked. "They don't need to," said another. "They already own our fear." "Then we must act first," shouted a younger delegate. "We can't live under their shadow forever." The elder delegates stared at him. One of them, a survivor of the old war, rose slowly from his seat. "Listen well, young one," he said. "You think you understand them because you've seen their ships, but I saw their silence." He leaned close, his voice a whisper. "When humanity stops talking, it means they've already decided how the war will end." No one spoke again. Meanwhile, on Mars, the next generation of humans trained beneath the red sky. They were not taught to hate, they were taught to remember. Their instructors told them the same words that had guided their ancestors through war and peace alike. "We don't fight for conquest. We fight so no one forgets what happens when you bring fire to our home." The cadets repeated the line until it became a promise carved into their hearts. One evening, as dusk fell over Earth, an old woman walked through a quiet memorial garden. Her hair was silver, her steps slow but sure. It was Admiral Sarai Mendoza. She had long retired, long faded from command, but the people still bowed when she passed, even though she asked them not to. She stopped before a small stone monument bearing one simple name: Eli Drake. Her hand brushed the letters gently. "You'd hate what we've become," she whispered, "but you'd understand why we had to." A soft wind blew through the trees, and for a moment she swore she could hear his voice again, the voice of the soldier who had fallen in the ashes of the Threxian citadel. "You finish what they start, Sarai, always." She smiled faintly. "I did, Eli," she said, "and now the galaxy remembers." Far beyond Earth, in the cold, dark void between stars, the last transmission from human command still drifted across eternity. No one knew where it came from or why it still played. But sometimes, on old frequencies, lonely travelers swore they could hear it, faint, distant, echoing through the black. "You declared battle. Now we'll remind you what true power means." It was not just a warning anymore, it was a legend. Every ship captain knew it, every ruler feared it, every child on every world grew up hearing those words in hushed tones. Because the galaxy had learned the truth. The humans didn't rule by might or numbers. They ruled by memory, by the ghosts of their wrath and the silence of their resolve. In the end, centuries later, when the historians of a new age tried to define humanity's legacy, they did not call it a reign or an empire. They called it the Age of Fear, an age when peace spread across the stars not because of treaties or diplomacy, but because one species had reminded the universe what war truly cost. And so, long after the guns had gone quiet, the message remained, burned into the heart of every civilization. Never wake the gods of war. Never test the silence of Saul. Never forget the day humanity rose. And the stars themselves bowed in fear.